That is the Department of Agriculture. I didn't know at the time, but I've always had that in the back of my mind. Wound up in the teaching field, so started teaching junior high science, 7th and 8th grade, in a little town called Ada, Ohio, up near Lima, Ohio, western section of Ohio. Both my wife and I were teachers, so we had the summer off. And although I did a little bit of work around during the summer months, needed something a little more progressive. So I applied at Mammoth Cave after drawing a circle around Ada and figuring out a day's drive, and Mammoth Cave was one of them. So I applied the first year, didn't get anything, got the postcard, sorry. So I applied the second year, postcard, sorry. Applied the third year, and it was kind of ironical because my dad and my younger brother were planning to hike most of the Appalachian Trail all summer long. We had progressed a little on the Buckeye Trail in Ohio and kind of shakedown cruises. We were ready to leave in 2 weeks, and I get a telephone call saying, "Kevin, would you come down to Mammoth Cave?" So I knew I could not turn that down. So I come down here, found a place to stay with my wife and little boy. At the time, he was just born a few months earlier, Darren, and worked down here for 3 months and found it just exactly what I thought it should be. And so the next summer, if I applied, and because I guess I did a decent enough job, they allowed me to come down again for a second year and third year. And then my wife said, "Why don't we try a different park?" And I said, "Okay, we'll try a different park." Well, then when they sent my application, they offered me a GS5 instead of a 4. And I said, "Ooh, we went up in pay scale. Can't turn that down." So we wound up coming down, and I guess I'd say the rest is history. I've been here since the summer of 1969. So the hardest thing about coming down here when you're living in another state is finding a place to stay. I couldn't stay on the park. That was for single people. You had to come down a month or a couple weeks early to look for a place. And you needed a furnished spot. You needed something. You had a kid, and then later we had 2 children, and had to be furnished. And who wants to rent for 3 months with a bunch of kids? So it was hard, but I managed to find somebody who worked at the hotel, and they moved up to Isle Royal during the summer, and their house was empty. So for many, many years, we just kind of switched houses, so to speak. That worked out well until he retired, but then his son also had a house available. So we were pretty much, by then, I knew enough people down here to be able to find a house afterwards. But that was the most difficult part, was finding housing so I could stay here. So was I making any money doing all this? Probably not. You have 2 houses to take care of and family, but everybody enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. My wife enjoyed the vacation from teaching, and my kids enjoyed it. And everybody said, "Hey, when your kids become teenagers, they're going to hate it because they want to stay back with their friends."
Yeah, I'm curious about that too.
Well, as it turned out, they didn't want to go back. My one son was the head drummer in the school band, and the leader said, "If you don't come back in August while we start practice, you can't play in the band." And he said, "Okay." Of course, when he got back there, they allowed him to play because he was too valuable to let go. But the kids really liked it all the way down. My one daughter, when she was getting ready in high school, she probably was the one that didn't want to really come back. She had a lot of friends up in Ohio, but so it was 1 year when she stayed with friends up there. But the rest of the time, kids were down here.
So you said, one of the first things you said about first year I didn't get it, second year I applied, and you said it was exactly what I wanted. What were the elements that said this is exactly? What are the elements of what you wanted at the time?
Well, you wear the uniform and the hat. That's part of the thing, because you're a member of a rather unique group. It's a service. Being a teacher and standing in front of people really didn't bother me that much. Of course, you're something new. You have to learn about it and go through it. But you're outdoors, or in this case indoors when you're in a cave, but because I didn't think I would be a cave guide. I thought I'd be a naturalist and wander around the woods and showing people the trees and the birds and the butterflies. But as it turned out, I was assigned to be a cave guide. And that was a lot of fun. I knew geology. That was one of my minors in college. And you go in with a group of experienced guides, and you listen to what they're doing and kind of following through. And of course, we have a week's orientation before we go in. And the big thing in doing all that was having your own style. Try to pick up. It's nice to sometimes copy somebody, but you really can't copy somebody else. You get ideas from them, but you really can't copy their style. You have to have your own. And also that's why I think many of us are very unique. And meeting the public, it's most part, people are on vacation and they want to have a good time. Once in a while you get somebody who had a little bit too much to drink around 4th of July, but as long as you talk to them in the proper manner, and you can kind of bring them down from their high and go through it. I had very, very rarely any major problems with the public. I would say rarely, because once in a while you do, but those are minor things. And so you're away, to me, I was away from all the humdrum of teaching. I go home at night, put my feet up, read a book, relax. I didn't have homework to grade. One year I was a supervisor. They asked me to be a supervisor. Higher pay scale, and I'll give it a try. Hated it because I couldn't wear the uniform. I was in civilian clothes. So I'd get on the bus, sit down, there'd be a kid behind me. I'd turn around, "How you doing there, youngin'?" And mother would pull the kid away. "Don't talk to strangers." You forget you're not in a uniform. So that was hard. It was hard. So I told him, I said, "No more. I want to be down there in the trenches with everybody else." I think one of my most amazing enlightenments in terms of National Park Service, I was taking a class for some extra credit while I was teaching, and we met in this big room. There was about 30 of us, and the professor at the first day was going around and said, "Well, what do you teachers do during the summer?" And I was halfway through the line, and the first one said, "Well, I'm a tennis pro. I teach tennis." Polite applaud. Went to the next one. "Oh, I train horseback riders. I have a horse field, and sometimes even go to the Soviet Union at that time, the Soviet Union, and we help people over there train horses to do certain things." And well, they went through all of these, and they came to me. I said, "Well, I'm Kevin, and I'm a seasonal ranger, park ranger at Mammoth Cave National Park," and the place erupted. I mean, they applauded and whooped and hollered and stood up and clapped. And, oh. So it's a job that a lot of people admire, and I thought I was pretty lucky to have been that. So
it's interesting. I talked to one of your colleagues before you, and there's this thread of educator and interpreter, and there's a similar path that the two of you have had your life careers.
Right.
And are there commonalities? And
I think there is. First of all, you have to know what you're going to be doing. At least have that ability to think fast on your feet when you come to a situation. Know about the environment, the world around you, and hopefully be able to convey it to a variety of groups. Now, when you're a junior high teacher, you're teaching 7th, 8th, and 9th graders. You have to have it kind of simple. And I think majority of the people don't want complications. They want simple. How's the cave made? You don't want to talk about carbonic acid and all the chemicals that go, the water dissolves it. And usually that satisfies most people. Any questions? Well, is there anything in the water? And then you can add more to it. So I think that part is a thread that goes through it. You have to be able to enjoy the public and the people, and be able to research and figure out the various aspects of your particular job that you're going to do. And so, yeah, I think it helps. And we have a lot of college kids come here during the summer months, and most of them are, since they're in college, they know the drill as far as studying and working, and they have a good time. And I think the majority of the people that worked here were retired teachers or going to be teachers or were teachers. Now, I was a teacher, but I was up in Ohio, so I came down here. Many of the folks around here are still teachers, and yet they like to come here in the summer. And during busy weekends, like last weekend in Thanksgiving, they came through. But now I'm a permanent member, and I stay here all the time. But I didn't think I'd ever want to be a permanent. I thought maybe it might sour me a little bit. I would get too used to it, too blasé about it. But it's been quite a number of years, and every day, yeah, I'm going to go to a cave, talk to people and explain things. Now, you have 120 on one tour, you pretty much give minimums and you're on your way. Today, when I came back from the tour I just did, I only had 8. And it was like family. Walk along, point things out, show that here, Of course, you got to watch your time because you can get 2 hours for 120 is, easy to do. When you got 8 people, you think, wow, you fly right through. But you think you got so much time, and so you want to show them all this stuff that you're aware of. And so I like the winter. It's a lot of fun. But because I only knew summer for the longest time, I couldn't believe how anybody could stand it when there's nobody around. It's like I say, it's a very relaxed atmosphere in the wintertime. And for the most part, again, the people are retired, they come here and they have a lot of time and they're not rushed, and they usually have a lot of interesting questions to ask. So, yeah.
Yeah. So what were some of the, I think because you're a teacher, you're a genuine probably person that can interpret and read and read the human
We like to
human
think
nature.
we can do that, yes.
When you first got here, who were some of the people that you learned from, or what were some of the elements that you remember, maybe putting in your toolkit when you?
Yeah. Well, a lot of humor. When I first started here, most of the guides were, as we would say, old school. Very little in the way of education. Their main thing was telling stories about the cave. And as far as facts are concerned, yeah, they had memorized some facts and they would throw them in there. But I noticed that when they were going through that type of thing, people were kind of shuffling around. But when they were telling a story of some sort, then interest perked up and they wanted to know how that story was going to end. So to me, being able to know the story, now you're not going to repeat the story as they do because they have their own style. By keeping that in the back of your memory banks when the time permits, then a story about something, a little humor tossed into us there. Today, many years ago, they invited me down from Ohio in February to give my historic tour. Apparently somebody thought it was followed the themes and the way that they were trying to get people to do. I really didn't think of it that way. That was just what I was doing because of picking up. So it was much more structured. And after a while, it was cut back on the jokes a little, Kevin. Just be a little more serious about some things, which was hard to do. And now they've been here a while, I go back to my jokes. I hope I give the people the trip they want, but it's a lot different now than when I first started. So I think a person coming in today would be under a much more structured, this is your plan, what are you going to say here, what are you going to say here, what are you going to say here, kind of already figure. I'm an extemporaneous person. I might be thinking, hey, this is a good stop to talk about subject A, but somebody asks you a question, you never get to subject A. You do that maybe somewhere else, or if you don't do it at all, what's the big loss? So those are some of the things. The old timers were just the camaraderie, the support that everybody gives everybody.
Yeah, talk about that.
So when new people come in, you want to make sure they know they're part of this group and not afraid to ask somebody if how they're doing. And we usually, those of us who've been here a while, know how to ease in a suggestion or two. You're twirling with your hair all the time. Don't do that. Oh, I might not. Yes. You might want to put your hands in your pocket even though you're not supposed to do that, or put them behind you or in front. Twirling. Little things like that is what we try to do. Somebody says, I'm not really feeling very well. Hey, I'll do your tour for you. That happens all the time. I mean, I've done it. People have helped me out occasionally on that. So, they talk about the Mammoth Cave family. It really is. We're unique. I can't speak for all Park Service personnel all over the Park Service, because many parks, like the Smokies, are big, and they're divided up into many little visitor center spots, and so they're in their own little group. So I suppose in their own group, you work for the Smoky Mountains, yeah, but I work in such and such place, Klingon Dome area. Here, everything is right here. And people come here, it's the name, Mammoth Cave. So they're going to go in a cave. I know emphasis was on the outside world, which is fine with me because that's what I studied, and I thought that's what we should do too, is walk around the surface. But many folks say they didn't come here to Mammoth Cave National Park to walk in the woods. They came here to go in the cave. But things are changing, and the river and the bike trails and the hiking and picnicking and just driving through the woods in their cars, cycles and stuff, is adding more depth from what it used to be. It used to be cave, and that was really it.
So we have people that lead tours underground, but then we also have people that maybe if you would have started it, a couple years ago rather than in
Right.
the '69, you may have really been doing a lot
I
of.
would have concentrated on the surface in evening programs. I would never have gone in the cave.
Would that be a naturalist position, or
That
what
was
do
a
you call
naturalist,
that?
We started out with naturalists, law enforcement, and guides, and then of course maintenance and administration and all the rest. But there were really 3 different divisions, and in the beginning, guides were guides, and naturalists were naturalists, and rangers were rangers, law enforcement. We did have a superintendent one time came in and said, mix you guys up a little bit. So I actually traded with one of the naturalists to do their job on the surface for a day, and they did my job in the cave. And I think that kind of broke the ice, and after that was fine. Even had some did law enforcement, but because of the rules of law enforcement, you can't do that anymore. You have to be specially trained in law enforcement, so they're still the unique group. Unfortunately, when people see a law enforcement, they're either in trouble or they're violating a law of some sort, so they always get kind of the bad reputation. Hey, you're speeding, or hey, I have a flat tire, In the cave, hey, we're more friendly.
Are naturalists, cave interpretation, and law enforcement, are they all considered ranger, or what is a ranger?
Yeah, we're all given the name ranger as it's written on our badge, ranger, but I think we really consider ourselves interpreters and interpret certain things. We like to call ourselves guides. I know that part is kind of antiquated as far as what the administration would like us to be, but as far as I know, I'm guides. I call this the guide house, even though a lot of people call it the lounge. To me, this is where the guides are. But we don't have naturalists anymore. We do it both. So I, for the longest time, did evening programs. I did surface walks, even did interpretive ones when we had the Green River boat rides down in the Green River. We did some interpreting on that. We had bus tours that actually took people through the outside on trails, back roads and stuff with the school buses. And so, we're supposed to be able to do any cave tour, any program, any natural trails, because it's all written out now. There are ISPs, the way in which you're supposed to do certain things, but it's up to you on how you want to put it together. The slavery walk. I think if you went on each one of our slavery walks, it would tell about the slaves at Mammoth Cave, but we'd each have our own way of describing what was going on, just like we do in the cave. So.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like there's more. Speaking of, there's more multi-use trails, and did that come about because of public demand, or is it just something? Is it marketing, and hopefully we'll get more visitors? Or?
I think a combination of all those. It happened about the 70s when visitation had been cut drastically because of the gas crisis. We didn't have anybody coming, and so start thinking about, well, what if we offered a backcountry trail deal? We had a few surface walks around here. How about a float ride down the Green River in canoes? We could do that. So there was a pretty good push in a couple of years to diversify, to get on the surface. We have 53,000 acres of surface spot with a lot of history on its own up here. A lot of nature, the whole business, because it was all privately owned at one time. And there are still remnants of houses and churches and schools and cemeteries and old roads and fence lines. And walking down the trails, hey, do you see that? How those trees are all the same age and they're going in a line? That used to be a fence row right there. And on both sides was farmland. And maybe, see that great big old tree over there with all the branches coming out? That was probably growing in the front yard of a house. And you walk over there and you see these 4 piles of stones were the foundation of that. Those are the types of things I think were lost in the early days, but we're starting to try to bring them back. And so, yes, it's Mammoth Cave, but it's also Mammoth Surface. A lot of stuff up here. So personally, I'm happy that that's finally occurred, because like I said, when I first joined up, that's what I thought I'd be doing. So,
right. When you and your, so you were seasonal, and then after you retired from Ada,
right,
you moved here.
I came down, we bought some property, which, by the way, I own a piece of Mammoth Cave. It goes under my property. I bought some property, built a house, and my plan was hopefully I could work a month before the season started, a month after the season was over with, kind of intermittent in between. But I guess I was lucky in a way that a position came open, and a number of us were offered these extra positions, and I was one of them, and I said, well, okay. So now full-time. And I really do enjoy it. Like I said, in the beginning I didn't think I ever wanted to be permanent. I did try for a permanent position in another national park, but at the time the amount of money you would get was even less than school teacher's salary. I said, I can't afford to do this, So by keeping my teaching job and doing this in the summer, it was the best of both worlds, back and forth. Get all charged up at the end of the year and run back in this classroom, and by the time June rolls around, you're ready to come back here. Yeah, I led a Jekyll and Hyde job, in the sense that you had 2 different personalities, because when you're teaching, you have to be a little more formal with the kids, and although we had a great time, and so, down here, you could kind of let loose, and we did more social stuff down here, and parties and visiting. We had more friends and folks down here than I had back in Ohio, because you just didn't have the time. You're always working on school stuff.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
I did belong to a lot of organizations up there, which dragged me down. So it was easy. Oh, I can't be president. I'm not going to be here during the summer months. Sneaky.
So you moved up, and you were talking about it was hard getting at first a place to stay because you were a
Right.
family. So there's there's quarters where single people live, and then
Right.
were there people in your kind of, not predicament, but in your situation where it was a married couple that would come, and is that part of your cohorts you're talking about?
There were a few of us that did that. I don't think anybody anymore from the summer comes. The summer months down here, unfortunately, are only 2 months long at most. When I first started, it was from Memorial Day to Labor Day, and maybe a day or 2 on either side of that. Now they don't get down here till the end of June, and bye-bye the middle of August. And those people who are out of state, there's just no way they can begin to do that. So you have to get local folks to do that. But yeah, there were people coming from California, from Oregon, from Illinois, Pennsylvania, that we knew down here. Some of them actually camped the months they were down here in trailers or tents or motorhomes, that kind of stuff. So definitely devoted. But I needed a house or a solid roof over my head. So, but I always managed to find some pretty nice places. So.
So I think somebody told me that you like to guide off the beaten path kind of tours. Is it?
Taking folks in on the extra hours trip or evening tours, yes.
Is that for people like an interviewer like me, or other staff members, or?
Generally speaking, it's members that are here. When you're here for a couple of years, and where's that tunnel go? You never get a chance to do that stuff. So in the evening, we would set up an after-hours trip, and we would go down into those areas and show the people what was around that corner when you have an opportunity to do that. As far as folks such as yourselves, there have been special tours set up when they have like called Roots of the Cave, where people who used to live here, they have their little get-togethers, and sometimes they get some of us guides to take them into parts of the cave they might have been familiar with when they were here living in the park. Special groups, maybe I took a group of superintendents, including our own, into part of the cave. I get VIPs, a variety of organizations and groups. They might say, hey Kevin, could you take this group down into, show them the river, because even though the river's not on a normal tour usually. So those are the kind of things. But I belong to Cave Research Foundation, CRF for short, and I got a chance to do a lot of back off the beaten path hiking. I would come down in the holidays. My wife hated this. Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter. She said, you got to stay home one of those holidays. So I would come down on Thanksgiving. That was my one time to do that. And you just go in the cave and go all over all these far off places and learn all these different places and cave with the gurus of the caving world. Roger Brucker, Richard Zoff, these are names I just toss out. But the
Tell me more about, so the Cave Research Foundation is a national, international?
it is now. It had its start here back in the 1950s when it was surveying and mapping a privately owned cave within the Park Service called Crystal Cave. When they were buying up all this land to make it into a park, it was one of the in-holdings they couldn't buy. Privately owned, and it really wasn't worth the fight to tie up all your resources, so to speak, try to get that. Although it was a big cave, nobody had this wildest idea that it was joined to Mammoth, you know. So they finally bought it up in the 60s, but this fellow who owned the cave was a caver himself, but he knew he had a lot of cave and he needed some help surveying and mapping it. So offshoot of the NSS, National Speleological Society, came and did a lot of work. And when they got done with that particular expedition, a number of them said, well, there's a lot more cave, we need to keep doing this. So they incorporate themselves into more of a scientific organization, Cave Research. And when the park bought that cave, they said, can we still keep exploring and mapping it? And so they had to get an agreement, obviously, with all that, and that just kept growing and growing. And they go to Hawaii and Costa Rica, and they used to go to Iraq and Iran. I mean, they were in China, you know, cooperation all over. But this is their headquarters, and they could spend all their time in Mammoth and still have plenty left over. But I managed to, I was reading a book called The Longest Cave, a book describing how they connected up some of the big caves in the area. No, it wasn't that one. The Caves Beyond. This is about the expedition that took place, the NSS one. And I was reading that, I had a few minutes, I was reading a chapter of it, and this one lady, her name was Diana Dawn, she said, where are you in that book, Kevin? And I said, well, right now I'm going through Floyd's Lost Passage. She said, ooh, would you like to see that tomorrow? I said, would I like to see it? Yes. That was my first or second year working down here. She said, well, we're going tomorrow. Now, the reason I know Diane is we babysat for her boy. I had two boys, she had a boy, so kind of babysat. So she said, we're going tomorrow.
So she says, you want to go on?
She said, do you want to go? And I said, sure. So the next day we went. And apparently I did a good enough job keeping up with her. It's a long, hard road to go. But I enjoyed every minute of it. And she said, you know, we have this organization, Cave Research. Yeah, I know. She said, would you like to come down on an expedition and actually go in and map and survey? And I said, okay. So that's how I got started doing that. A lot of fun. Got to go see a lot of places. So, and even in Mammoth too. So when somebody would say, well, this tunnel over here, you know, I'd like to see what's there. And somebody said, well, I'll bet you Kevin knows where it is. So, Kevin, could you take us in? And in the early days, it was pretty easy to do so. All you had to do was write out this little paper and say, we're going in such and such cave and tunnel, we'll be back at such and such time. Okay. Well, but I was still seasonal. And seasonals could not lead expeditions. You had to be permanent. So we'd have to rope up some unsuspecting permanent and put them down as the lead, even though they had never been there. I had, but they hadn't. But I had to have that name and know them on the group. And when I became permanent, I said, yes, now I can go anywhere I want. Then he changed the rules.
You can't do it.
No, you have quite a lengthy process of going through. The idea of just going in the cave to see where it goes is more, you have to be more educational, learn something, which fits in because George Morrison, who found the new entrance part of Mammoth Cave, he didn't find just where we go today, he found a lot of other stuff. And so if you really want to understand about George Morrison, you've got to go to some of the places that he also went, or his crew went. And otherwise you think, well, gee, this is all he found, no big deal. But he found a lot of stuff, really, like I said, his crew did. So those are the kinds of things that are definitely educational. And some of the surrounding caves in the area we used to go to. Unfortunately, white nose syndrome, the disease that attacks bats, has pretty much put a cob on many of the outlying caves where the bats hang around. Because we're worried about transmitting the fungal disease that kills bats. And I understand, bats are interesting creatures and just can't go in and look around if it causes some damage to them. So many of the outlying caves we used to do are no longer on our after hours list. But there's still plenty of stuff right underneath our feet that every year you get a new crop coming in, new group. So you take a lot of after hours trips in when you can work it in.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that makes it a little bit difficult is that you all have different time schedules. In the summer, you could be here as early as 7 in the morning or as late as noon. So you're in the cave, they're eating lunch, you're eating lunch, they're in the cave. So sometimes you never even meet the people who are here that summer except in a picnic or a social get-together afterwards. You have Wednesdays and Thursday off, they have Friday and Saturday off. So there's 4 days where you're not going to see one another. It makes it a little difficult, but that's what makes it fun when you do finally meet these people at a picnic or some kind of award ceremonies that the superintendents and them put on. Oh, you work here too? Yeah, we're going to go, or these after-hours trips. That's how you get to meet them. So it's a good way of getting more camaraderie.
Was there any animosity between cave research people doing that and then the people that the cave guides and that sort of thing? Or
Yes.
yeah,
In the beginning it was, because a lot of the old-time guides were told, well, you guys can't go there. But I don't think many of them really wanted to go there. There were a few of those who had been, in their younger days, crawling around a lot in the cave. In fact, even though they weren't supposed to mark on the walls, a lot of times it wasn't a national park yet. And so you find their signatures occasionally of those old-timers. But as they got older, they may not have wanted to cave as much, but the ability for them to go wherever they wanted to, when they wanted to, was suddenly kind of taken away from them. They still had to get permission to go, but CRF could go anywhere they wanted to. And they have keys to every cave in the place. I want to go in there, I have to go beg for a key to get in that cave. They've got keys. Well, it wasn't quite that way, but obviously if you're doing research and scientific work, not to say that CRF didn't go in for a lot of fun too, I'm sure they did, but the big thing is if you're going to go explore a brand new cave, you might as well map it as you go. That way you're doing minimum damage and you're getting a record of what's happening as you go through. I don't think there's that feeling anymore. I know when I said, oh yeah, I'm going to CRF, you're doing what, But we had a number of guides that were CRF people and guides here. So and the old timers, a lot of them are gone. I know some folks who were giving a tour, and here comes 4 or 5 CRF people with their headlamps and their dirty clothes. make way, we'd like to get through, because we were in a big hurry. That would really rile some of our guides. It disrupted their tour. So word got out, you don't disrupt tours, you wait until they're out of the way. I don't care how hurry you are, stay away. And sometimes that made fun because you could hear a tour coming when I was doing it, so we'll hide in here, so you go sit down in the dark, turn your lights off, and watching the people go by. And I remember one time somebody asked the guide, well, what's back there? And the guide kind of oh, that's where we keep the bears. Of course we heard all that. And there's always that kid with a flashlight. Grrr! Mommy, there really are bears back there. Little things like that happen.
So you mentioned your kids before. They didn't really flee. They really enjoyed it here.
Well, they were born, so to speak, into caves, and they were here all the way up until they graduated from high school and went on to college. So, in fact, my one son actually helped out making one of the movies down here that they had on National, Reader's Digest made a movie, and he helped carry equipment around during the evening, during the nighttime. And they said, well, go stand over there or pretend you're crawling through a hole. So he's in those types of things. He did research with Earthwatch. They did all the way from Violet City to Natural Entrance, which is about 3 miles. For many years, they recorded and documented every piece of Native American stuff they could find along the way. And he helped with them with the computer work and the theodolite and the grunt of crawling around and holding so they could bounce the laser beam off of it. So he did that for many years. My other son was a nice little thin, wispy little person, and he got into CRF, and they loved him. Go through that little hole, So he was able to do that. My daughter's in a number of different publicity pictures because the person who took all those was a friend of ours, and they needed models. And Kevin, get your uniform. I need you to stand there. So when President Reagan showed up as his first visit to Mammoth Cave, I didn't meet him personally, but he got to see me a lot because they had a display of photographs of Mammoth Cave, and I was probably in about every other one of them. I was like, who's that guy? Well, that's Kevin. But, he didn't ask that, but one of the first presidents I actually got to wave at. He came here to visit, so that was kind of fun.
So your kids still have an interest in that, the natural?
Yeah, my one son's, he got married and they started having a family, and when you reach that certain stage, we got young kids, it's hard to get away. I got away, but it's a little harder for him to get away. So he's still a member of CRF and occasionally will come down, but he stays at our house now instead of at the headquarters and set up a tent or whatever because we live so close to it. He lives in Defiance, Ohio. And my other son, he would do things like that Earthwatch. He'd want some exploring things, but now it's hard to get your family members to go with you on these after-hours trips. Technically, they're not allowed to go. You have to be an employee of the park. And when he actually worked for the park at one time, helped with computer stuff. He could go anytime, along with us, but once he non-volunteered or the volunteer job was over with, then no. But they come down, but don't necessarily go caving anymore. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. But I think it was a great experience for him. You read the book Old Ranger or something, and talk about the family and the kids, and they're out in the woods and learning about this and tracking these animals, and it's almost what they did. So
it's a good way to raise a family.
Yes, I think it is. And there are families down here that still are able to do that, and a number of our permanents have families, and their kids have been involved, and we had generations of cave guides that were here from pre-slavery days and to post-slavery days, and even on up today. 3 or 4 generations of father, son passing the information on down. It doesn't happen that often anymore, but you still have families that are part of the Mammoth Cave family. as far as guides, and they all know one another. So, yeah.
So, any final words about the meaningfulness of this whole thing and how far you've come? You've come this far, and
Yeah. If you'd have talked to me back in 1969 that I'd be here in 2013, I would say, no, you're crazy, But the first, second, third year, it starts getting in your blood. It really does. I wished I'd have bought a piece of property back then, but I couldn't afford it at that particular time. And it was really, am I going to always work here? You want to do some other stuff. But I really have no desire to go up the ladder, so to speak. Being a cave guy, second career, all right? I've already had one career, I retired from it. This is the fun part. I don't have to do it as such. I said, the only way you can really go up the ladder in the Park Service is you get away from the people. And all of a sudden you find yourself in an office. And the only contact you have with people maybe would be with somebody who's got a complaint. And you have to be the mediator that way. So I had no desire to ever do that. Then my 1 year, one summer of being a supervisor cured me of that right away. I enjoyed doing it. It was a lot of fun. But in terms of the people I was helping. But as far as myself, I didn't like the prestige, whatever you want to call it, of being called a guide and being able to walk out there and talk to people whenever I wanted to. Suddenly you were a stranger, but not to the guides, because they were hopefully learned something from it. I had 8 people, I think, that I had to train. Those that had been here a few years were very easy to, although sometimes it was a little hard because let's try something. I tried it. They were here before I was. How in the world am I going to tell them what to do? That's sometimes a little bit difficult. But to me, the best of both worlds, and now I have the best of one world, and that's here. Now I only have a couple more years. I put in my resignation papers for the end of 2016, because that's 200 years of guiding, 100 years of the National Park Service, 75 years of Mammoth Cave, and almost 50 years of marriage. So kind of all this is celebrating at the same time. So I feel it's a good way to say goodbye, but probably never do. I live too close. This is always home. Thank you very much for being able to do this. I appreciate it.